All right, let's dive right in. For a long time, the intense emotional experiences of borderline personality disorder have been just shrouded in stigma. But what if we could pop the hood and see what's really going on inside the brain? In this explainer, we're going to unpack the science, moving away from judgment and toward real understanding. It all really starts with a very human question, one that's at the heart of our whole investigation today. Why can emotions feel so powerful, so immediate, and just so overwhelming for some people? To even begin to find the answer, we have to go inside the brain itself. So, to get our bearings, let's think of the brain as having two key systems in charge of our feelings. First up, you've got the emotional alarm. This is driven by the limbic system, and its star player is the amygdala. Its job? Detect threats and sound the alarm, fast. Then you have the calming voice, which is your prefrontal cortex. This is the part that helps us hit pause, think things through, and soothe those initial emotional flares. And honestly, the balance between these two is everything. So the first big clue researchers found has to do with that emotional alarm. The evidence points to it being, well, hyper-reactive. Kind of like a smoke detector that goes off not just for a fire, but if you happen to burn your toast just a little bit. This quote from someone named Anna, wow, it just gets right to the heart of what a hyperactive amygdala feels like. It's not a thought, it's a full-body, instant reaction. That feeling of danger she's talking about, just from something as small as a sigh, that's the emotional alarm system just blaring at full volume. And here's the thing. This isn't just a subjective feeling people are describing. Scientists can now get a direct window into this experience. They can actually see the brain's alarm going off in real time. So, using fMRI studies, scientists have found this really clear, consistent pattern. The amygdala, that's our alarm center, it lights up like a Christmas tree when people with BPD see emotional faces or hear criticism. But here's the kicker. At the exact same moment, the prefrontal cortex, our calming voice, often shows less activity. So what you get is a much louder alarm and a much quieter regulator, which can lead to a brain that's basically primed to see threats everywhere, even misinterpreting a neutral look as hostile. And this brings us right to the other side of the equation. See, it's not just about the alarm being too loud. It's also about the system that's designed to soothe it being less effective at its job. Neuroscientists have a name for this whole dynamic: frontolimbic imbalance. I know, it sounds super technical, but it's exactly what we've been talking about. It's this mismatch where these powerful emotional alarms from the limbic system just aren't being effectively managed by the brain's calming systems up in the front. So this leads to a pretty logical next question, right? We've seen how the brain functions differently, but does it also look different? Are there any actual physical, structural changes that go along with this imbalance? And the data here is pretty striking. A huge meta-analysis, which is a study that pulls together the results from tons of other studies, found that on average, there were actual volume reductions in key limbic structures. We're talking about 13% smaller in the amygdala and 11% in the hippocampus, a region that's absolutely crucial for memory and regulating stress. But, and in science, there is almost always a but. We have to be precise here. The evidence is mixed. Not every single study finds these structural differences. And a really important factor seems to be a person's history with trauma, which suggests these changes might actually be the brain adapting to really difficult experiences, not necessarily something a person is just born with. Okay, so we're getting a picture of emotions that are more intense and harder to regulate. But there's another piece of this puzzle. Why do those feelings often stick around for so much longer? The scientific term for this is slow habituation. Normally, habituation is just your brain's alarm calming down after a trigger is gone. But with slow habituation, that response just doesn't fade. It stays cranked way up, lingering long after the event is over. It's like an alarm that's incredibly hard to switch off. And once again, Anna's experience just makes this abstract idea so real. My whole body felt stuck in alarm mode. I mean, that is the perfect description of slow habituation. It's not just about feeling upset for a moment. It's about the body and mind being unable to switch off that high alert state for hours and hours. So now, let's start pulling all of these different threads together. This is where we can see how the neurobiology we've been looking at translates directly into the day-to-day reality of a person's life. First, a really crucial clarification. These brain patterns, like a super-reactive amygdala, are not exclusive to BPD. We also see them in conditions like PTSD, depression, and anxiety. So what is it that makes the emotional experience in BPD so distinct? Well, it really seems to be the unique combination of these factors. It creates this kind of emotional cascade. First, you have the very sensitive alarms going off. Then, you add in that much slower process of calming down. And finally, there's this difficulty connecting those intense feelings to the reflective thinking part of the brain. It's this specific sequence that can create such sudden and powerful emotional storms.
And this brings us right back to the question of why. This isn't about a brain that's just born wrong. Research is showing more and more that our experiences, especially in childhood, literally shape how these brain circuits develop and talk to each other. A history of trauma or neglect can essentially train the brain to be on high alert, because for a time, that might have been a necessary survival strategy.
This experience from Anna just shows how it all comes together perfectly. You have a neutral event, her partner just checking a message, and it triggers that whole biological cascade. Her alarm system, shaped by past experiences where being ignored might have meant danger, screams a warning. And the profound insight she had was that her brain wasn't lying. It was doing its job, but it was overprotecting her based on an old script.
And this right here is the single most important takeaway from all of this. The brain in BPD isn't broken. It's adapted. It learned to be overprotective as a way to survive environments that felt unsafe. It's a brain that's been wired for a level of threat that hopefully is no longer present.
This understanding completely shifts the conversation from one of pathology to one of potential. And it leaves us with a hopeful and just profoundly important question. If a brain can learn to be on high alert, what tools, what therapies, and what kinds of relationships can help it learn a new pattern? How can we help it, finally, learn to feel safe?